And thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. I'm Dr. Vincent Baycoat. I'm professor of theology at Wheaton College, and tonight I'm wearing another hat besides my professor of theology hat. I'm wearing my director of the Center for Applied Christian Ethics hat. Well, why are we here tonight? Well, it goes back to 2016, actually. 2 years ago, Kurt Tillman, who's here, oh, that's Kurt over there. He emailed me and asked me about connecting with an organization called ProGrace. And that's how I met Angela Weszely. And she and her co-founder came and visited me in my Center for Applied Christian Ethics office. And I was very intrigued and impressed by the conversation that I had with them, because it was providing another way, and in some ways I think a more in-depth way, of engaging questions around this question of abortion. And they called the organization ProGrace. And so now here we are 10 years later, and Angela has written a book, which is available for purchase tonight if you wish, and she'll be signing those. Also, you're all probably aware, we sent out a survey about two weeks ago about abortion, and we were very surprised at the very enthusiastic response. We've had over 200 people respond to it, I think over 260 actually. And which was a surprise, because we haven't had that kind of response to any of the surveys that we've done. One of the reasons for that survey was that when Roe versus Wade was overturned, at least for me, the end game, in terms of what I heard a lot about pro-life questions going back to the 1980s, was the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And really what that was a big reset, putting us back to zero, to T0, because it went back to the states. And with it going back to the states, what it was already a complicated circumstance has become even more complicated. And so tonight, to help us to think through some of this, Angela Weszely is here. I'm so glad she is with us. And now I will say, please welcome Angela Weszely.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here tonight, all the way from Evanston. And I want to thank you for your courage to step into this conversation and the trust that you have in the center and in me that we are going to have a different conversation tonight, because we will. So thank you so much. We are going to be discussing at tables. I hope you like the folks at your table. We'll be discussing with them tonight. So first question, and do this in a lightning round, really quick. Your name, are you a coffee or tea person? Extra credit if you tell us what type you like. And then do you tend to lean into complicated topics like this or avoid them? So go ahead at your tables really quickly. Each person take a turn.
My name's Tyler, coffee guy, through and through. I love the complicated. I love tension. That draws me in by far. Yeah. My name's Nick. My family's British, so it's in tea. And I would say you should.
Awesome. All right. Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Baycoat, and thanks to the Center for Applied Christian Ethics, and for all of you who responded to the thoughtful student survey. That will shape the questions that we'll walk through tonight. My own questions began about 20 years ago when I started working for a Christian pregnancy organization. I expected it to be non-political, that we would be helping women and children equally. Instead, I found myself in the middle of even what was then, in 2006, a very polarized divide. In this space that I was working in, being politically pro-life was synonymous with the work we were doing and being a Christian, which I hadn't expected. And in some cases, that led to a mindset where some people on staff thought that the ends justified the means. And what I mean by that is some of the ways we communicated what a woman could expect when she walked in the door weren't exactly transparent. about what services we did or didn't offer, and about how we would approach the conversation with her. That turmoil in me was tension that I knew from before. I'd had tension with the debate before, but I could always leave it. This time I couldn't leave it. I really wanted to do this important work. So I started asking questions and listening instead of avoiding, which is what I had done previously. And I was able to hear perspectives that people had about the work we did. I was able to hear stories of the women we served. We had a lot of conversation in community with my colleagues, and then a lot of time immersing myself in Jesus' stories and how he interacted with people. Through all that, I was able to process with my colleagues a new way to think about abortion, new language we could use, and a new way to engage the issue. And after about 10 years of doing that, I became so passionate in conversations with church partners that other Christians could also experience what I had experienced, that I launched ProGrace, and that's when I met Dr. Baycoat. And we exist to help Christians across denomination and political lines reframe the abortion conversation through a Jesus-centered lens that goes beyond the pro-life, pro-choice divide. And so the questions you submitted to the center, and we also got some with ProGrace, were thoughtful and they were really weighty. I could feel a lot of emotion behind them, and there was a clear theme that came up again and again that I want to name, and that was people have been hurt by how Christians have engaged this conversation. So we heard words like shame, harsh rhetoric, and relational damage, relational collateral that people were experiencing. This reality sits right in the center of why we need to have a different conversation. Because only about 7% of women approach a church for help before an abortion. The percentage of men is even smaller. And with that reality, nearly 70% of women who have had an abortion identify as Christian. So it means that not even people within the church, and definitely people outside the church, don't think we're safe. So despite the time, energy, and focus we've put collectively, not us in this room, but the church collectively, into communicating our position or influencing outcomes, the reality is we have very little impact on people who are facing this reality. And that stands in stark contrast to the life and ministry of Jesus. People moved toward him when they had needs, not away. And so that's why tonight is not about giving answers. It's really about stepping back and asking, are we even asking the right questions? And are we asking them with a Christ-like posture, like he would do if he were sitting at one of these tables with us here tonight? So, we have grouped the questions that you submitted into 4 key questions, and we will explore them together. But before we jump into those, it's key to walk through a framework we'll use to engage those questions. And this framework is based on the ministry of Jesus, and it was what evolved over time as I had those conversations. So the first one is the way Jesus shows us we can have shared values as Christians above our political allegiance. And these are all actually on a handout in the middle of your table. I see people taking notes, which is awesome. They're also printed on the handout if you want to write on that. So what I'm going to do right now is something a little different, but I find it's really effective. I will read a passage from Matthew 22, verses 15 through 22. If you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes and try to picture this scene, because this is a story. This is Jesus interacting. So just close your eyes, picture the scene, and see what jumps out to you. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. "Teacher," they said, "we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax." They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Then he said to them, So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. When they heard this, they were amazed. So they left him and went away. So go ahead in your tables and discuss what stood out to you when you were picturing that as a story, as a scene in your mind.
I think a big thing is the intent of the question is to track it.
Okay, let's come back together. All right, so what's happening here? Their intention was to what? Trap him, exactly. The vehicle, what vehicle did they use? A charged political question, right? A binary, a zero-sum framing. It's this or this. I heard some people say, this sounds familiar to conversations I have, right? It feels very relevant to today. And he doesn't, what he does actually, who has one thought of what does Jesus do instead? Someone just from your groups. What do you notice that he does instead?
He asks questions.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought first. He interrupts that whole thing with a question. Great strategy, by the way. Highly recommended. He does it all the time. And he disrupts the binary, doesn't he? I heard another group say he does answer. He just answers in an unexpected way. And he elevates God above Caesar. So maybe it's not a zero-sum game after all, right? Jesus gives us hope. There's pathways through these conversations. And he doesn't downplay Caesar. He does elevate God. That's what we're going to do tonight in our conversations. So we'll use him as our model. I am not suggesting we don't vote. I vote very faithfully. My husband's here, you can ask him. I vote. I'm not suggesting we never talk about laws. I also do that with very trusted people. What I'm saying is that for the last 50 years, politics and the law overturning Roe v. Wade has really taken up so much space in our Christian world in the abortion conversation. And so the words themselves have come to mean different things to different people. And so it feels like a zero-sum game when we try to have that conversation, especially if we don't know the people very well or it's in like a not trusted environment. And so instead of getting stuck defining those terms or defending them, we're going to step back and not use them tonight. We're going to build bridges between us. We are Christians first, right? And then we're pro-life or pro-choice second. So that is the conversation we will have tonight, to build bridges with each other, to practice doing it, not to defend our positions, and see how it feels, and if we can continue having those conversations. How does that sound? Good plan? All right, that's what we're gonna do. So the next piece of the framework is equal value, equal dignity. And this is something that all Christians hold dear based on verses like this. This is Genesis 1, 26 and 27, where God says, let us, beautiful picture of the Trinity, make humans in our image, according to our likeness. So God created humans in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. These next phrases are from the first passage I ever heard to talk about issues of abortion. And just listen very carefully. Feel free to close your eyes or read along to what's being said in these verses. O Lord, you've searched me and known me. You're acquainted with all my ways. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, you are there. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You covered me. You wove me together in my mother's womb. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me when none of them existed yet. All right, so what do we see jumping out from these passages? First is, we are all made in the image of God, which is amazing when we think about how we talk to each other, how we respect each other, how we listen to each other. Secondly is God's intentional design. He's so personal. And aren't these verses beautiful? I love it that even if I go to hell, you're there. Like, he is so loving, so intentional, so personal with us. And we also see now a mystery. And the mystery that we talk about with equal value, equal dignity, is that at some point in a pregnancy, there are two people in one pregnancy. We don't fully understand it, but as Christians, we can hold that mystery together. Because the way of God is that these two people are equally valued, equally as important. And with that, we can't try to help one and bypass the other. So, the question I started asking all those years ago, what was bothering me, is how well are we elevating them both in this conversation? And I had an experience, I still remember, there's two people who worked with me at CACE at the time. Remember the purple hallway? I was walking, like this dark purple color, I was walking through the hallway, and out of nowhere, this impression just came in my mind. I believe it was the Spirit, and it was like this. You know that passage in Psalm 139? And I was like, yeah. I might have even said it out loud. Sometimes I do talk to myself. But the words were, it's just as much about the woman. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, of course, that's so obvious. But for me, it felt like a lightning bolt that it had to be the Spirit nudging me, because I had only heard that verse taught about the child. And so that reframing, I began to realize how much the binary had impacted my thinking. How much the binary impacted how much I read scripture verses like that. It had trained me to believe that valuing the child means one thing, and valuing the woman means a completely different thing. But the reality of God in intertwining two people in pregnancy does not allow for that separation. What impacts one will impact the other. And he's the one who did that. That's his design. So the question for me became, how do we hold both with equal dignity? And I realized there is not a way to support one while bypassing the other. That is the problem with the political binary. It'll never work. There is no way to do that. When we offer genuine, consistent support to a woman, unconditional support, giving her what she needs, we're also honoring the dignity and value of the child. And when we ignore her, we undercut both people. That's the way God set it up. So rather than choosing between them, which is so tempting in all these conversations, right? Are you for the woman or are you for the child? The first thing a Christian does is say, I'm going to align myself with the way God has designed this intentionally. These two people are interconnected, they're not competing, and I'm going to start from that framework. And that can change the whole posture of a conversation. So, you guys get a chance to discuss. How does this idea resonate with you as you think about it? Go ahead and discuss in your groups. Yes, if you didn't talk before, you get to start this time. That's good. Great. Okay, we'll come back together now. I love this. Take about 5 seconds and we'll come back together. I love the conversation, and you can stay after tonight and have further conversation. So the next piece of the framework is our shared value as Christians, that we are transformed only by grace. So again, if you're comfortable, here's another Jesus story. So go ahead and close your eyes as I read this from John 2 through 11 and see what God highlights to you. At dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." Okay. Go ahead and discuss again at your tables what stood out. And this can just be a phrase, something odd you've never seen. Doesn't have to be, huge explanation, but what jumped out?
Yes, I like that.
All right, we'll come back together. I could talk about this verse all day long. I've been doing this for 15 years. I love it. What do we see happening here? If we think about the chronology of this story is so important. The very first thing we see is religious people twisting the law of God for their own agenda. So, we see it's another trap. The religious leaders misused the law. Anybody know what the law actually said? Who's supposed to be stoned? Yes. Okay, so she was caught in the act of adultery. Who was there? The man. There was a man there and a woman. She was caught in the act. I mean, my mind goes a lot of places. How did they know this was happening? Are they going around looking in windows, or was it a setup? Why was the man left there? They knew the law. They knew exactly what they were doing. I'm not ripping on men here. I'm trying to talk about a spirit. I believe in the spiritual battle. I'm talking about a spirit that allows religious people to think the ends justify the means, and what they ended up doing was using this woman as a pawn. Right? And what were they willing to see happen to her? Death. I mean, if we think about the weight of what this is, and I'm not blaming any one person, but I do see so much relevance between this story and the way we've tried to have the abortion conversation. And we have to look at how Jesus just breaks through all of that, the hypocrisy, using the woman. And as we ask God to expand our paradigm, I promise this will happen to you because it's happened to me. We will start to see all these subconscious and false assumptions that we hold about this issue that we aren't even aware of. They're just baked into our culture, just like this was probably baked into their culture, right? So for example, even how translators subtitle this story in our Bible. What's it usually called in our Bibles?
Woman caught adultery.
Jesus and the adulterous woman. Why isn't it called Jesus confronts clergy abuse? Because that's not the Bible, that's the translators. The translators are like, oh, this adulterous woman, right? Because we have these, this is sin. We have these sinful paradigms. What's really happening is religious leaders misuse the law to the point they're okay seeing a woman killed. Like, that's what's happening. Anyway, this is what I mean. Jesus can show us what's really happening because his way, the way of Jesus, is he corrects those abusing authority. Right? That's what they say, deal with her. He says, I think I'm going to deal with the religious leaders. He protects the vulnerable. I like to imagine, did someone say they saw it like a movie? I like to imagine in a movie, he stood between them and her, right? He protects the vulnerable, and he invites transformation. Even with them, he was inviting transformation, right? He was gentle. He waits, he writes, we don't know what he's writing, and then he answers their question. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Just so beautiful. We have such a beautiful example in Jesus of the pure wisdom of God, how we can handle these conversations. And lastly, as I walk through this story often, people will ask, what about grace and truth? I get that question a lot when I talk about grace, because I go radical with grace, because Jesus is radical with grace. So, grace and truth is mentioned in the Bible twice. It's John 1:14 and 17. And those verses tell us that in contrast to the law, grace and truth together, one package, are embodied in Jesus. Those two aren't in contrast. It's grace and truth in Jesus, in contrast to the law. So it is a great question. And let's think about what truth people are kind of circling around in this verse when they ask me this question. What truth do you think they bring up? The last line of the verse, right? Go and sin no more. Isn't that where we go when we think truth, we think corrective? What's the order of truth in this passage? What's the first truth that gets shared? Anyone without a sin can cast a stone. The first truth is we all sin. That's the first truth in this. What's the second truth? Does no one condemn you? No. No condemnation, right? There's all that truth happening, and then this order offers transformation. Oh, now you can go live a new life. That would have been liberating to her, not as we hear it. Sadly, for many people, especially in this conversation, their experience with Christians has been just the opposite. And so this is repentance on our part to really rethink, what does Jesus teach us about grace and truth? He is immersed in all the truth of God, right? And he can completely change our posture when we think about what does it mean to be people full of grace. All right. The next one, the last one, before we get to the questions, is our shared responsibility. Almost the entire national abortion conversation rests on what one person should or shouldn't do at one point of time, right? Very brief point in time. When in fact, that point of decision is not isolated at all. After years of research and listening, I see that the vast majority of times that decision is shaped by realities, pressures, and assumptions, again, so embedded in our culture, most of us don't even notice them. In national studies, about 75% of women say their primary reasons for an abortion are lack of support, emotional, practical, or both. And many of those pressures aren't just individual, they're shaped by our shared cultural environment. For example, women on average still earn about 80 cents for every dollar that men make. Single mothers carry some of the highest healthcare costs relative to their income. And in many areas of the country, childcare costs are approaching housing costs. In repeated listening research, specifically with women facing unintended pregnancy, those themes appear, but also these deeper and more raw themes emerge, which are shame, a shift in identity. Women use words like, I will become that person, and never mentions her partner. She carries that alone. I will become that person. And the second is scarcity. It's not possible to provide for a child. And again, no mention of a support system. She feels that weight on her own. So we'll look at another relevant quote of Jesus from Luke 11:46. Jesus replied, and you experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. So what's happening here? Burdens are being placed on other people, right? Responsibilities being avoided, and abuse of power leaves people to carry those burdens all alone. And Jesus is calling that out. And we see echoes of that today. When people are left to carry pregnancy and parenting alone, it profoundly shapes the outcome. As the people of God, we can step back and ask him new questions about our responsibility and the culture that we are helping to create. So, go ahead and discuss, how might Luke 11:46 apply to our cultural environment around pregnancy and parenting from those realities that I shared? And here's the verse again. Okay, take about 5 seconds to finish your comments and we'll come back together.
But then that's women to think about the financial
Awesome. Okay, we'll come back together. Luke 10 is another great one to study, the story of the Good Samaritan. where the religious leader says, "Who is my neighbor?" Right? And Jesus inverts everything that the religious leaders thought about who deserved their kindness, their help, their compassion. The Gospels are actually full of these. And in both of these scripture passages, we see the way of Jesus is he reframes responsibility, who is my neighbor and who's putting burdens on, moves us toward shared responsibility, and he centers empathy and compassion. And what this does for us in the abortion conversation that I love is it begins to shift the question from what should someone else do, because that's so much of the dialogue, what should someone else believe, what should they do, and it turns it to what are we a part of? What culture are we creating? And what is God calling us to do? So that wraps up our 4-part framework that we're going to use tonight. And before we move into your questions, you get to hear from someone, Dr. Amy Peeler, who's a professor here, deeply cares about this community. She's also part of the ProGrace community and contributed an amazing essay to our book. Thank you so much, Amy, for being here. She has a few words for you guys before we go into questions. Oh my gosh, yes, just take it. That's what we do, we pass the microphone.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, it really is a joy to see such a full room and such an important conversation, and that's quite powerful to hear the level of response. It's intriguing to me that this remains a key conversation among college students. That was true when I was in college in the late 90s to the early 2000s. I went to a Christian college as well, Christian liberal arts, and this was one of the major issues. And even then, it felt like where I went, everyone was on one side, on the pro-life side, and that felt like the only option. In fact, I've taught here at Wheaton for, this is my 14th school year, so I've been here for a while, and I have seen a shift in the conversation in my time. I love office hours with students. I love getting to know you individually. That's the great joy of teaching at a place where the class sizes are so small. And over my time, I've had conversation about this issue. And early on, it was rather monolithic. If you're a Christian, you are pro-life, there's no conversation. But in the last, 5 to 7, maybe even 10 years, the title of this evening is true. It's complicated. More and more students are coming to discuss this topic, not sure where they want to land. It is not because they've changed their convictions about life. We were just discussing at our table that this is the bedrock of Jewish and Christian ethics. The worlds around them in the ancient Near East and the Greco-Roman world treated with disdain the life of children and babies. Not so Jewish people and Christians. That has not changed, but how we manifest that commitment to life, that's what feels complicated. And I love ProGrace, like saying we are Christians first, we're not aligned to either political party. But at least in my experience as a professor, I have to own that the increasingly acrimonious political setting has contributed to the complication. Now, this might not be where you are, but I just need to own this is true for many students. Whereas in my growing up, it made sense to be on one side, that has gotten complicated. Because the side that tends to embrace life doesn't seem to value women. In fact, let me say that stronger. There are horrific statements about women from the leader of that political party, and that makes it very complicated. Now, I have said a hard thing, right? You can come and chat with me about it. We can have a conversation, and I mean that genuinely. If you know me, you know I mean that. But this has contributed to the angst among students. Where do I stand? Because there's not a clear place anymore. And so the need for the work that Angie has been doing for years to say, Christians can do it differently. We don't have to choose one side or another. We can love the people, that precious baby, and that precious mother. My own transformation was not only in conversation with students about their angst about this issue, but in my research. So I am a New Testament professor, and I've spent a good amount of my time thinking about the life of our Lord, namely the fact that he was a baby, right? We think about it at Christmas. But I've spent my the last 10 years or so thinking a lot about the life of Mary. So yes, it is the case that God has designed human biology such that the symbiosis between the mother and the child, you cannot value one and not value the other. This is true of our Lord. This is how God saved the world, by deciding to experience a pregnancy, to have a mother. We cannot articulate the Christian confession, the most basic Christian confession, Jesus is Lord, without assuming Mary. And so it is studying the way in which God values her embodiment and the way in which God values her agency. When Gabriel comes to Mary, she is presented both the honor and the shame of being the mother of the Messiah. She is told enough so that she can make an informed decision, and she says yes. That changed things for me. Because God honors her agency, in this conversation, I know that I must honor the agency of these women. And when we do so, I believe we empower them to love these babies well, when they have the resources, when they have the community support. So it is my research into the center of Christian faith that has said to me, I cannot be one side or the other, because God honors life and God honors the agency and choice of women. So let's find a way to do both. And that's what ProGrace does. So I am here tonight as a participant, as someone who wants to keep learning from the experience on the ground with those who serve. But I will say as a theologian that this seems very much the right way, the way to proceed that is in line with the heart of God that we can know when we simply look at the life of our Savior. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
You guys are very lucky to have someone like Amy, thank you. And Dr. Baycoat, who is also very easy to talk to, I know from my conversation as well 10 years ago, so I'm sure you are open for conversations as well. We are going to actually start having some questions ourselves, and we'll lay some guiding principles based on our Christian faith. First is listen to understand before responding. This is great for any complicated conversations. This is what you love your parents to do, right? I have a freshman in college. She's really always wanting me to listen before responding, right? We all want to be treated this way. Look for shared values. We're taught to look, like Amy said, are you this? Are you for women or are you for children? But no, look for shared values as Christians first. This is key. Interrogate the question, not the person. You'll be discussing some of these in your groups. So it's really helpful to say, I'm curious about the language. Or we use the word sometimes, interrogate, or I want to ask about that question. But we're giving each other the benefit of the doubt, knowing that language can really trip us up in this. And then we'll stay rooted in this idea that we all have a shared responsibility. We're not just going to talk about one person at one time making this decision, because that's a very myopic and inaccurate view of what's happening. Okay, you guys ready? We're going to do the first question together, having a different kind of conversation, and then after that, I'll have to figure out how many tables there are. At your table, you'll be taking one of the other questions that came up in the survey and walking it through the framework. That's why you have the frameworks at your table to look at. Okay, so you ready? We'll do the first question together. How do we hold a theological posture that honors the dignity of both the woman and the child when there are real tensions, competing needs, and complex realities? Okay, we'll workshop this as a whole group, so hopefully you feel comfortable to say things out. So when you hear that question, where does your mind go first? What part of that question do you think about first? Where does your mind go when you hear this question? Or what word jumps out? Just yell it out. Competing needs. Does it feel like that sometimes? Competing needs. Okay. All right. What else?
Complex realities.
Complex realities. Yep. And you guys name those in your surveys. Absolutely. What else? Anything else jump out?
The how part.
How do we hold this theological posture? What's that look like? Okay. All right. we're going to start with our shared values above our political allegiance. So what can we agree on together as a shared value of this question? How do we hold a theological posture that honors the dignity of both the woman and the child? What's one way, and actually Amy did such a great job of articulating that, what is a shared value that we could hold that would help us hold that together, the dignity of both of them? Who has a thought? A shared value from what came up?
Both are made in the image of God.
All right. Can we agree on that? Imagine having those conversations. Both are made in the image of God. We can hold a firm commitment that both are made in the image of God. Is anyone worth more than the other? No. Right. So we can actually start at that place. Jewish and Christian, I love the history. We have a rich history of this. So we can start right there. That's great. Could you have a conversation with someone on a different political side if you knew you agreed the image of God? Awesome. Great. Okay. Did you have a thought?
Just something else I feel like
Yeah.
we can agree on is a need for meeting those needs and meeting those complex realities.
Love that. If both are made in the image of God and they're interconnected, who do those complex realities impact? Yes. See, that's the thing where the conversation gets broken down. If we can say those complex realities impact both, right, then we can work together and start talking about them and addressing them. That's great. What else? A shared value you see that you can have this conversation. What about those complex realities? Can we hold any shared values about those complex realities or needs?
They need to be identified.
Sorry?
They need to be identified.
Okay. And
We
how
need
do we
to
do
name
that?
them.
Huh?
What?
Name them?
Yep.
Name them. Ask what they are. How often do we ask the question? What's it like to be pregnant? Right, exactly. Ask the question, find out what they are, and name them. And then focus on them. That's great. Thank you. What else? Someone over here.
We live in a broken world, and it affects all of us, and we are all part of the problem.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, again, and we can have sometimes as Christians this looking down on the world, right? But I love this. We're broken, right? We need Jesus. He levels the playing field. That's beautiful. And that is a shared value across denominations. That's grace. Beautiful. Yeah. All right. What do you guys think? Do you feel like walking through this gives you enough to go on that you can have this conversation at your tables with the following questions? I think you did awesome. Any last clarification questions for the whole group before you break up into your tables and take new questions? Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to statement.
Oh, yeah.
It's important, this is no surprise I'm saying, that we remember the theological posture.
Ah,
That we
yes.
actually believe they're Christian commitments we actually have.
Yes.
And that we really want to take those seriously.
Yes.
And not set them aside, and let other realities take greater priority.
I love that. And can we speak to how many theological postures we have?
There's a lot.
Thank you. I feel like one theological posture gets talked about in this
Yeah.
issue, or maybe two, right?
There's a lot.
I think that's what's really important, a robust theological understanding, a robust theological posture, interrogating the scriptures, interrogating the Jesus stories, really diving into those assumptions. That's great. Yeah, you know, it's interesting when I started having this conversation, it was like, oh, you're going to get away from God. It's like, I need God more. Like, we're elevating God more. It's actually Caesar and the politics that get really sound bites and rhetoric and myopic. We will elevate God more and have a richer theological shared values if we can put those labels aside. I love that. All right. You guys ready to dive in? You know what? I'm not going to tell you. Just pick a question, okay? Here, it would be these three, and I'll put them all up together. You can think about them. The second one is, how should Christians understand what you talked about, the realities and pressures pregnant women experience? How do we understand them first? And what responsibility do we have to respond? The second one is, how do we live out a consistent commitment to life that reflects the full heart of God, both during and after pregnancy? This got to a lot of comments about after birth, like some of the criticisms of Christians. And then what does faithful Christian engagement on this issue look like, especially when we don't all agree, and many people have been hurt by the Christian response to this? All right? All easy questions, right? You guys can pick which one you want and workshop it in your groups, and I'll be walking around if anybody has any questions.
How are we guys feeling? Simone and great.
I mean, I'm way PTH, but.
Thanks. Yes. I'll have an answer later, don't worry. We'll solve it. I just heard whatever three was stuck out to me. Yeah, what does a faithful Christian engagement on this issue look like, especially if they don't all agree? But that only stuck out to me because honestly,
All right, let's come back together and we'll wrap up. I was able to walk around a bit, and I heard such thoughtful comments, so I'm just so encouraged to have spent this time with you all. My passion is to see a new Christian response to abortion, and I just hope your generation leads us into that. So thank you so much for being here. If you want to take any next steps in the ProGrace community, we're always having conversations like this, and we have tons of resources from free downloads, podcasts, there's information on the book there, but we would just really love to support you in any way as you're having these conversations, because how you show up in this matters, and you have a chance to really make a difference where the generations before you haven't, in my opinion, really demonstrated God's full heart. And you guys have a chance to. So I'm encouraged by all of you. I'm so glad to have this time together. If we have nothing else,
I'm just curious, before we wrap it, does anyone have, like, is it kind of like an open question or whatever that you want to ask Angela before I yes?
Yeah.
Do you have a question over there?
We have a question.
Yeah.
So, throughout this talk, I've heard a lot of, I guess, gentle suggestions and, applications of Bible stories. I was just wondering if you would maybe provide like a very precise, clear statement of what you want us to do, or what your stance is on this issue, because I feel like that's been a little bit vague,
Sure.
to be honest.
Yeah. I want to see the church look like Jesus. That's what I want. And so that means studying the scriptures together, discerning in community. I want to see the church reflect Jesus. I believe when that happens, we'll be a safe community. So I dream about other things happening. My only goal is to see the church look like Jesus. What do I hypothesize will happen if we look like Jesus? Way more than 7% of people will come and approach a Christian. They will say, I know where I could get help and understanding. I'll go to a church, I'll go to Christians. I mean, to Amy's point about the early believers, they helped people in need, they were approachable. I've seen that when we listen to women about what's going on, they make a decision that they're wanting to make, which most of the time is not to end a pregnancy. Women don't want to do that. There's no other choice. So we're opening up pathways. We're opening up different ways of being. So again, I believe that if we just focus on looking like Jesus, I think we've taken too much of God's role on ourselves in this conversation. That is my challenge to all of us, is to really think about when we hear Christians talking. Is that my responsibility or is that God's responsibility? And so my dream is that we would look and sound and feel like Jesus, and people would be drawn to us. So I know it's not, I guess it is one simple sentence. Yeah, but maybe not the ones we're used to hearing. So thank you for that question. Yeah.
Yeah, we were kind of just talking at this table back here. I guess coming in, kind of was thinking about, maybe how this is framed a little bit of like a third option of pro-life, pro-choice.
Yeah.
And kind of, well, at least what I was hearing, what our table was hearing, is that this is very much, I think, still in the pro-life framework, in the sense of, I don't know, would you say that like we're like I can see a lot of these talking points like being reflected in the pro-life movement as well, of like we're prizing the life of the baby, and the life of the mother as well. So would you say that it's in a sense just like spinning how we're seeing this question, and it's still falling in to I don't know, like I guess kind of to get to the point, is there ever a time when the baby's life would not be like we're trying to preserve the baby's life, or anything like that? I just like thinking some issues of like, I think agency was brought up and that kind of thing. So just kind of think about that. Are we, I don't know, because it feels like we're still on the pro-life side of the spectrum here. Dude,
So interesting, yeah. How do we define pro-life?
Yeah.
How do we define it? I mean, that's the problem, right? So what I said tonight should resonate with people who hold a pro-life political position. Part of the problem with saying pro-life is moral view and God's view and legal gets all right. But when we pull that apart, what does that actually mean? There are lots of Christians who end up voting pro-choice that also resonate with the exact same thing. So the point of this is, we're Christians first with this deep commitment to the image of God in every person. And that is, and so this is gonna open up lots of conversations, I hope, for you guys. I hope this is just the beginning. What does that mean to be a Christian with a deep commitment to the image of God in every person? And if I'm, whatever political side I'm on, can I believe that another Christian on the opposite political side could hold that same value of the image of God in every person? That is the challenge I'm putting out there, that we are unified as Christians first, and we understand the deep limitations of our political parties, the deep fractures, the deep problems, the deep simplicity and total ineffectiveness of passing this law or that law, and how crazy the laws are. Like, even the laws aren't defined. Is it a pro-life law if it's 12 weeks? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, that gets maddening, that game. So we are holding this commitment to the image of God and being a people that can be a healing force in our community. So that should resonate with people from both. But I ask my husband, I don't tell anybody how I vote. I don't use those words, and I'm specifically trying to engage Christians across denominational and political lines, because I think we can unite. So, yeah, good question. Oh, wow, we got more. Okay, yes.
Okay, so beyond political
Yeah.
lines and such, we want to treat this as a moral issue, right?
Yeah.
We're looking for points of unity, right?
Yeah,
Would we be able to say, as a point of unity, that it's wrong to take an innocent human life? I feel like that's not a political statement. It feels like it's more moral, or is that still something that you think we should avoid?
So I'm not giving advice on that. Christians need to hold a rich, deep theological arsenal that Dr. Bako was talking about.
Here's the problem with your question. For sure. What is an ectopic pregnancy?
An ectopic pregnancy.
Yes. You know what that is?
So yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Generally, that would be classified philosophically. We're not taking an innocent human life. We are trying to help the mother.
Yeah, I know, but my point is that's not as simple as the question that you answered. Right? So you have those kinds of complications.
The vast majority of abortions don't occur on
Well, but this isn't about the vast majority.
No,
I'm just making the point about the question, right? Because if you ask the question that way, right? I mean, because I'm with you about those concerns about people using abortions for birth control, et cetera, but every situation doesn't lend itself to an answer that's an easy one, right? And so some of those are very wrenching situations for people, right? And if they feel like that the problem for me, if I make a certain kind of decision, you know, which is life-saving one way or another, let's say, then okay, now what am I going to think about myself? And what's my community going to say about me? Okay, those are the kinds of questions that we have to think about, right? And so I think you're asking an important question, but as phrased, it didn't create space for circumstances that just don't fit the question. So what about those, you have to think about those things as well. If we're talking about, hey, Angela, where do you stand on this or that situation? So
we're interrogating the language, which is
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
interrogating the
yeah.
language.
Yeah.
So, and the thing that I like to say is twofold here. One is, there are many, many ethical concerns that contribute to a pregnancy being terminated. That is the conversation I would like to have. Many, many deep, troubling ethical concerns when a pregnancy is terminated. One is, okay, who's responsible? Women can only get pregnant 3 days a month. How often can men cause a pregnancy? Every day. Why is it the woman's fault? Like, we have deep rifts, problems in our society with how we frame this, so that's why I'm saying keep that question and keep all these ethical things. Why is it the responsibility of the woman? Why don't we pay for birth? Why isn't giving birth free? Why do we not have pregnancy discrimination, protection? Why do women still make less than men? Why don't men have maternity leave? What? We don't. We are 40th out of 42 nations in guaranteed maternity leave. We don't have it. So lots and lots and lots of ethical concerns. My second thing about ethics is, it is possible, I see it all the time, for a Christian who wants to see fewer abortions, that's their, and a Christian who wants to see women supported unconditionally to unite. Those two things we're not competing here. They're not competing. When we support women, I've worked in direct service for 10 years. We've got direct service people here. We can ask them, what happens when we support women? No little girl says, I can't wait to grow up and exercise my right to choose. This is happening. I mean, do it? No. We want to be astronauts. We want to be president. Nobody's thinking, I can't wait to go have an abortion. That's not the way it works. And so that's the reframing of what are the ethical things actually causing the vast number of abortions. And it's lack of care in our society for people who really need it. So I think bring them all. That's what I say. Bring them all, put them on the table, and interrogate the questions, and really believe there are Christians that come down, on very different sides on the legislation of abortion that completely agree with our responsibility to protect the image of God in every person. It is possible. And that's a challenge, because as long as we are fighting each other, we're not going to be the safe place that allows for more hope. So, but keep them coming, especially in safe places.
There's one question there, and then there's.
I know, if people can feel free to go. I'm happy to stay, but I don't want
Well, I know
you.
that you're gonna be like, they wanna talk to you, so.
Okay.
So,
But you
there's
had a
more
question,
questions there, and.
Yes, ma'am.
So I really appreciate your attention
Yeah.
to the fact that so many women in our culture feel that kind of lack of support and how that informs their decision. What I am a little concerned about in those discussions and how we as Christians engage them is, I totally agree with your call to the church to come alongside these women. But at what point are we failing to stand up for truth that all human life has dignity, and that even the life of a child whose mother doesn't have support is just as valuable as the life of a child whose mother does have support?
Yeah. I think we answer that by supporting the women. Because if we believe that the child of the mother without support is just as valuable, we will support her. So I really do believe that with all my heart. If I thought laws were going to change any of this, I would be out there legislating. But even in states where they outlawed abortions, the neighboring states, the numbers just went up, the medical abortions, we're not meeting the needs. We're not dealing with the systemic issues when we stay at that. So I believe that the child of a woman without support has value. That's why I want to support her. And I see women, brave, courageous women. I mean, we just need to, it's possible. I know, it's hard. It's a new conversation. I appreciate you guys stretching yourselves.
Well, actually, did you have
Yeah.
So you're the penultimate question, and you're the last one.
Okay. I will be here to the last question.
I'm just sort of curious about your approach here and who your target audience is. Obviously, like, we're Wheaton, we're kind of a moderate evangelical institution. we do a good job of making both sides a little angry sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we made it to February without.
Yeah.
But are you trying, I guess this is a simple question, are you trying to engage both sides here with like, you want to get the pro-lifers a little bit towards valuing women a little bit more, and you want to get the pro-choicers to value the child a little bit more? Or is that, I mean, that's definitely oversimplification, but are you trying to target both sides within the church? Are you trying to get with that, like, are you going outside the church? Is this sort of almost like a pseudo-evangelistic kind of effort? Like, who are you trying to speak to?
Yeah. I'm trying to speak to Christians across denominational and political lines. And the ProGrace community is already made up of people across those lines. And when we start having these conversations, guess who gets interested? People who don't know Jesus yet. So yes, again, all these outcomes I dream of having, that is one of them, that people would see. I have literally had, someone was married, one of the guys in our community is married to a woman from a different religion, whether she was Buddhist or Hindu, I can't remember, and she was like, this is the first thing I've seen Christians do that I really love. Like, that makes me so happy. That's why I want us to live like Jesus, because, yeah, so. Pen ultimate question.
I think this is fantastic. I think
Actually, it was him.
Oh, I'm.
Oh, shoot. No, you go, kid.
Oh, but he said it's fantastic, so I'm going to listen to him.
Oh, thank you.
You can go first, though.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Sounds good. Just thinking a little bit more about Graham's question. I feel like this is an excellent conversation, and just to reiterate next point, it feels like all of these points are pro-life talking points. Like, just to kind of rephrase Graham's question, like, given the like huge ethical implications of like our society being not really suited for women who have difficult pregnancy circumstances, and like even with exceptions like ectopic pregnancies, which in which I argue like you can help the woman and the child in that case, but like given that, I think it's like a little concerning to me to like move in the direction that I've grown up my whole life seeing as like the pro-death side. And I guess I'm wondering, like Graham said, like, is there ever a scenario, including difficult ones like ectopic or financially destitute, where it would not be wrong to take the child's life?
Well, you guys really, I was just on a podcast and the guy kept saying to me, but is it, because that's the question we ask, right? Is it, I am saying what I believe, God creates all life in the image of God. I believe there is a mystery as to exactly when and how he does that in pregnancy. So there are Christians who will fall along different legislation lines because of when and how that happens in pregnancy. Where I think we can all agree as Christians is at some point in pregnancy, there are two people there. And that is what we can stand on. So do you see how I answer the question with different language? Because that is how I am best able to explain what I believe. And how, I think it's interesting you guys think those are pro-life talking points, because I know Christians who are pro-choice. And now, here's again, can I say this? The Christians I talk with, pro-life to them doesn't mean arrest women. And pro-choice to them doesn't mean up to 40 weeks for any reason. You understand? We do understand that? Like, Christians are much more, So that's why we can come together, because we can trust each other. And I do think having these conversations, like your question, is really best handled in a church community where you guys are discerning together. For me to sit up and say this, I feel like isn't productive, but I have these conversations in my close church community. I just know in a room like this, it won't be productive. So keep questioning, keep having them. A great question to ask guys is find someone who isn't a believer or isn't, on your political side, and say, I'm curious, what do you think about how Christians have engaged this issue? I really think that's a great place to start, listening. That is how I started on my journey. So yeah, go ahead, your last question. Yeah, you were saying it was fantastic. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, more.
I totally see how this would bring a lot of unity to be able to tackle a lot of issues. I'm thoroughly uneducated in this, and so I'd love to hear from you. What are the main things that you would like to see if that unity does happen between these values, between Christians? What are the things that are like, these are the main issues that make things complicated or hard, that are maybe systemic, that you'd want to see united action against? To tackle?
I want to see the church deal with the deep root of misogyny that is just lying under the surface and hasn't been dealt with. And I love the work Amy's doing in her new book. And we have been blind to not hearing women's voices in church, and the amount of abuse in the church. My work, when I lived through the Church 2 movement, my work shifted to be like, this isn't just, so abortion isn't its own issue. I really believe it's lack of value for women in the church, abortion. So we would repent, we would listen to each other. I want men in that conversation. There are many men in the pro-grace community. I think we need to reckon with that, because that is what allows all of this blame on women, and oh, you made your bed, lie in it, and oh, we're not going to give resources. It's easy to vilify women. It's too easy because of what's happened. With a church like that looks like Jesus, that elevates, all people equally, I want to see people flocking, knowing that they're welcome. I really think that starts with having this conversation. So I'd like to see this conversation start happening in churches, in safe places. And that is really hard because it's so divisive, but we're going to have to be able to talk about it. One of the first things that happens when we talk about it with Grace, and see if this happens for you, people will say, I've never told anybody this, but I had an abortion. People with lived experience, women and men with lived experience, we need to listen to them in the church. The stats are really low as to how many of them have told anybody in the church. They need to be leading, and I love in the ProGrace community, so many of them are leading this conversation. And then I have seen, and this started actually with Karis, with a support group for women in the church. They started going, and you know what? They invited their friends. And then they're like, what's that worship service that happens on Sunday? Maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll bring my boyfriend. Like, that's actually where I got the dream for ProGrace, when that started happening, and I backed up all this way to like, how can we see that happen?
Yeah.
And then I want people looking at us to say, wow, they look like Jesus. Maybe I'll check out that church. I mean, that's where I want this thing to go. But it really has to start with repentance, I believe, in the church first. So,
thank you.
Great. You guys are awesome.
Yeah.
This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She's not running off. She's gonna hang around.
There's no traffic tonight. Come back to Evanston.
Well, is there
I got time.
any easy way to get
There's
there?
no easy way to go to Evanston. So just stay and talk to me. Yeah.
Those who go to Evanston know why I said that. So she's around, and also, so here's something I'd like to leave you all thinking about is when you think about this question about the church, it's really interesting to ask this question, which is, what kind of formation is happening in the church to enable people to have conversation at all? And to be able to have conversation without thinking that it's going to blow up, that people are going to be screaming at each other, that rather than being patient with each other. That's one of the things that came up at our table about having patience and people really feeling like they actually can feel like they're being heard. So I think it's a really important thing, I think, for us to think about, and for us to think about the opportunity that we have to be people who, you're not saying that you don't care about life, but you're helping people to understand that, I'm a person who's willing to have these conversations, and I don't need to know what you believe in advance for me to be welcoming you into the conversation. I think that would be very surprising in the moment that we're in, right? Because a lot, polarization, a lot of fear, a lot of presumption, but of course, how much of us know anything about what other people think? How much do we really know about what people think? But we'll know more about what they think if they feel like they're in a situation where, I can actually have this conversation and the temperature's not going to go up, and I can actually maybe even make a new friend in this conversation. I think that would be very surprising to a lot of people, and it would certainly change the reputation of some people about what they think Christians are really like. So we have the opportunity to be those people, and certainly I think what you're doing is helping us do that. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and again,